Hello and welcome to Ever Forward. This is Ed Fletcher. I'm a longtime Sacramento reporter who recently started this video interview program, Ever Forward, as a way to try to help forward the conversation, and sort of adopted the tagline, Sacramento Conversations That Matter. My guest today will be Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg. Excited to have him on. He and I go back a number of years. I was a Sacramento Bee reporter for a number of years, and our time overlapped while he was pro tem of the Senate. And so I'm excited to talk to him about this new challenge he's facing in dealing with social justice issues. So we're going to get to that in just a second. Wanted to give a quick commercial for one of the other activities I'm involved in. I'm the president of Sacramento Valley Spark, and July 24th and 25th, we are hosting Summer Spark Drive-Through. It's in essence, kind of a Burning Man type street that will be transported to the mine shaft in Rancho Cordova, and people will be able to pay and drive through this experience. There will be installation art from Sacramento, from Reno, from Lake Tahoe, from the Bay Area. There will be fire spinners. There will be mutant vehicles. So all of the kind of things that we used to do in a park environment are now kind of condensed for a drive-through experience. And we're quite excited about this opportunity, and want to bring that to Rancho Cordova. And we've got a grant from the city of Rancho Cordova to do that. So pretty exciting there. Go to Sacramento Valley Spark for sacvalley.org for more information on that. Also wanted to give a quick shout out to Access Sacramento. This stream is airing live on Facebook now, also on Periscope, and we'll be sharing this on Access Sacramento as well. It's easier than you probably believe to take a program like this and upload it to Access Sacramento without leaving your home. So anybody interested in that, I would encourage you to look into doing that. It's probably easier and cheaper than you know. And with no further ado, we're going to add in Sacramento Mayor Darrell Steinberg.
Ed, great to be with you.
How you doing, sir? Welcome to the stream.
Good to be with you always, man. Happy
Great
Friday.
to be with you as well. I know you're super busy and a lot going on, so really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's always good to be in conversation.
For people who don't know you, I want to...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
There's a little bit of a lag, so I'm going to we'll end my sentences more clearly so that you can express yourself.
Okay.
If you could, I wanted you to talk about your history and how you came to this place. I know a lot of people may know you as Darrell Steinberg, that guy who's always been there, but I want to talk a little bit about how your history sort of frames where you're at today and where we're at today. So talk a little bit about how you got here.
I really appreciate the question because it is interesting, and maybe it's my stage of life, and now as a more of a middle-aged person, although I feel very young, or the position that I hold now. But I sometimes I actually see that I am seen differently by many people, especially younger people, than maybe my own history reveals. And so I appreciate the question. I started in politics as an activist myself. I started as a young law student, 24 years old at UC Davis, which was actually my way to Sacramento. And I've told the story many times, I was a law school tutor for a couple of students who were quadriplegic. And the law school prior to the ADA admitted students with disabilities, but the physical space of the law school itself was not very accessible. And the moot court room, which was the place where we all got to practice our advocacy in front of in a real courtroom-like setting, students in wheelchairs had to do their training in small classrooms downstairs because the courtroom was not accessible. And so I decided with my colleagues to take this on as a cause and asked the law school if they would spend the money to make the moot courtroom accessible. And they told me that they would, but they just didn't have the money and kept putting me off. And I kept going back. And finally, I went over to the UC Davis Central Administration building, Marac Hall, and asked one of the deans for the entire campus, when can the law school get the money? And he looked at me funny and said, we offered the law school the money many months ago. They turned it down because they didn't want to ruin the aesthetic look of the courtroom. I said, did they put that in writing? He said, yes, they did. I said, could I have their letter? He gave it to me, and I had it on the front page of the Davis newspaper within a couple of days, and that moot court lift for everyone was built within a couple of months. And that was my spark, where I actually saw the connection between being an advocate and changing the social condition and making change. And I became a young lawyer, and my first 10 years, I worked as really a public defender for people who were fired from their state jobs. I would work for SEIU Local 1000, then CSEA representing fired workers, took on cases involving discrimination, disability, had a lot of success. And then I got the political bug, and in 1992, there was an opening to run for the city council when Kim Mueller, who was a popular member, chose to go to law school, and I ran out of Tahoe Park. And I ran on a platform, same platform I ran on all my life, to invest money in kids and in neighborhoods. And as a young city council member, I launched the Sacramento START program, which was the beginning of the after-school movement in Sacramento. I served 6 years and was a progressive voice at the time. And then there was an opening because of term limits to run for the state legislature, and I did, and I worked hard, I won. Served 6 years, chaired 4 major committees: labor, judiciary, appropriations, and budget, and took on the cause of mental health, which maybe I'm best known for in my prior life, and authored all the signature legislation, not just to improve the mental health system, but I was also the state leader on foster care and child welfare and educational equity. I authored the millionaire's tax, went out there in 2004, Prop 63, and raises tax on millionaires, generating $2.4 billion for mental health throughout California. All done, by the way, money flows through the counties, and I often joke that if I knew I was going to run for mayor back then, I might have written it differently and said the money should flow through the cities, but it's still a great act and has helped a lot of people. I left after term limits in 2004, sat out for 2 years, came back in 2006, ran for the Senate, and became the first Sacramentan to lead the Senate in 125 years. I was elected pro tem by my colleagues, and continued my progressive work. Authored the major bill to provide alternatives to emergency rooms for people in psychiatric crisis, SB 82. I'm still active in Sacramento and throughout the state, but mostly I helped lead the state through the worst recession possible. And even though we made cuts, I'm proud of the fact that I helped avoid more pain than others would have allowed. Karen Bass, who's now being touted as a potential vice presidential candidate, was the Assembly Speaker, and she and I were close partners. We won the John F. Kennedy Profile and Courage Award in 2010 because of our work with the 2 Republican leaders, and helped the state get through a very, very difficult time with 2 governors. And then I turned out in 2014, and I should add one other thing in terms of my signature issue. So I was the author of the lead climate change bill during the time, SB 375, which has changed the planning paradigm in California, and also took on the issue of educational equity to say that more kids should get an education experience that involves real work experience so that they're prepared for both college and career. Termed out in 14 and thought I might be done, but in 16, when Kevin Johnson decided he wasn't going to run for a third term, I said I thought I was still not done with my public service and that I would run for mayor to try to apply the same values, the same skill set to the city I love that I had learned and practiced over 20 years of service. And of course I won. I was lucky enough to win, I should say. I'm now 3.5 years in and have pursued, again, the same progressive agenda, but I'll tell you, it's a different job. And the times are different. The challenges are different. And I am accountable, and I see it, I know it, I feel it. And all of that experience, though, is what brings me to this moment and this time as I help lead my city through COVID, through the absolute insistence and rightful insistence that we make racial and gender equity a cornerstone of our city and our decision making. I'm up for the challenge.
Thank you for that summation. And I think it will help a lot of people and sort of frame this discussion as we talk about how you move forward from here. In many ways, and I don't think this is a stretch to say you're the most experienced, polished, seasoned politician, political maneuver that has held the mayor's office in the city of Sacramento. But at the same time, you are somehow viewed as a moderate compared to what is happening in the streets there. But yes, compared to your council colleagues, you are perhaps as liberal or progressive as the rest of them. And I guess I'm wondering, like, how do you keep your ear to the ground and how do you figure out who you negotiate with? Because it seems like you're still the mediator trying to get this sales tax bill passed, but you don't know who to negotiate with and who the players are. So you're reaching for a solution and then they're saying, no, that's 2002 solution. You need the new solution. How do you keep your ear to the street? How do you authentically understand what's going on?
Well, this is the dilemma, right? And this is the great challenge that I face, that we face. And it really relates to your first question, which is how I'm seen by some people, especially my critics, and my own life experience and what's in my heart and what's in my head. I govern and lead by listening to people and by challenging myself, frankly, to listen and do things differently than maybe I have considered before. And that's certainly what I am feeling now. But there's no but to that. It's just I represent the entire city. And while my politics, my values, and my drive are all around the issues that have that are most resonant today and that are reflected in what's happening, as you say, out on the streets, I also have to be able to get a majority of votes to do anything. I must work with a variety of stakeholders with different points of view in order to move forward. And so in some ways, I don't take personally some of the pretty harsh criticism that's coming at me from the left, although I personalize it to the degree that I want to be more responsive and be a better leader. But I also realize that the complaints and the concerns and the fury is also about the institutions and the city as an institution, because there is, for example, a very clear tradition and a structure that says the city's primary role is to fund public safety, and the money goes to police and fire. That's the tradition. Now, I have tried with some success to bend that curve, to say that a core function of a city ought to include investing in its people and young people in what we call inclusive economic development. That's why I did Measure U. And so I'm one vote among 9. I proposed this. I helped get it passed. I begin the implementation to actually do what I said. And yet I face a lot of significant challenges, both structurally and otherwise, around fulfilling what people expect. And so it's a tough job. But it's a job that I sought, and it's a job that, and it's a challenge that I embrace. There is a difference between being an activist and actually holding a seat of power where you are responsible for governing. And compromise, unfortunately, in some instances, fortunately in other instances, is principled compromise, is often the only way you get anything progressive done within the system. I'll give you another example. I've proposed, I think, the most fundamental systemic reform around police funding and fire funding that anyone has considered, and that is to actually set up a whole new department in the city and say that once that department is established, that the police and fire service will no longer respond to calls that don't require police or fire response, and that we shift tens of millions of dollars to a differential response around mental health, around other issues that don't involve a crime or a serious health issue on the fire side. That will result in millions of dollars being shifted, tens of millions of dollars, and yet it will take time. And so the dilemma is, there are some people who say defund now. And I hear it, and yet I say that if you want to really engage in systemic change, you have to also change the structure of the underlying system, which I'm trying to do. And the catch-22, of course, is that will take some time. And so how do you measure systemic change and cultural change? Do you measure it by making a one-time announcement that you're going to take funding from one place and put it in another? Yeah, maybe that's part of it. But I guess my background is that I have always judged myself by the end result and by actually diving into the seriousness of what it takes to actually make the change happen. And so that's a long-winded answer to your question.
It sounds like you fundamentally believe, with some of the core tenets of the defund movement, that more police doesn't necessarily mean safer streets, especially if you don't do the other things that we know result in better solutions in neighborhoods.
I do.
But you want to talk about this in a more sort of gradual way, and in a way, I guess, try to please everybody.
Well, I don't know that I would quite put it that way. I want to see the systems change. I want to see the systems change. I don't want to just make a political point and then move on. I want to engage in public policy making that will actually make a big difference. I agree fundamentally with the impetus behind all of it. When I said to Dr. Kofer at the Measure U committee that I want to begin my presentation by agreeing with you that the system is stacked, I agree. What do we do to change it? in a way that's actually going to lead to success. When in fact, not everyone agrees with her point of view or even my underlying point of view. There are a lot of people out there that I'll give you a great example, a small thing. So there's a 1928 statute on the books that basically says you can be arrested if you don't stand for the national anthem. Somebody raised this, filed a lawsuit in federal court. I didn't even know it existed. So I look at this and I say, okay, here's an opportunity to maybe make an educative, to maybe make a point and to educate the broader community about the moment we're in. Colin Kaepernick kneeling could result in his arrest. Never be enforced, of course. It's an old statute, but still a point. So I call for repealing it. Well, I will tell you that there are a lot of people in this community who believe that I basically disrespect the flag and disrespect the country and disrespect veterans by virtue of calling for that small change. And of course, I push right back. But not everybody is in the same place. And I lead the entire city. And I'm probably the most progressive mayor you could have in this city. And I am pushing progressive change. But not everyone is going to be happy with me from either side.
I wanted to briefly argue the other side and say you could have viewed this as an opportunity to make big change in a fast way when you've got the streets at your back, as opposed to trying to chisel at this reform. But I do want to pivot and talk about the Inspector General's office. I know there are some people who look at it and go, this is old reform, this isn't going to make any difference. But I think that would be foolish to not try to make this work for us and better solutions, while at the same time, I kind of feel like it's putting a better mousetrap in the barn. That what you really need to do is change the way law enforcement view their relationship with the public, and to produce accountability where they're going to have more allegiance to the truth and to the citizens, as opposed to their fellow brethren who may have violated some code or some ethics. So talk about the AG's office and what specific about it makes it better than the current system, and what investigative powers do they have to really make better change and to highlight or to police the police better?
Well, first of all, I want to say that sometimes I do not understand the reaction of people who have been calling for a particular change for a long time. Somebody steps out and actually presents the change, and it isn't even acknowledged. I've never said that the independent inspector general and or the systemic change that I'm promoting to shift tens of millions of dollars from police to the community is the end of anything or is the solution. But I don't understand why the steps are not acknowledged for what they are, which are bold steps, and then to say, but that isn't enough. So that's one point I want to make. Here's why I think the Inspector General is actually vital and important. Because the way the system works now, anytime there is an officer-involved shooting, anytime there is a death in custody, anytime there is force which results in a serious injury to a resident of the city, the allegations are investigated by police internal affairs, police homicide if it results in a death, and or the district attorney, all behind closed doors, with none of the findings or conclusions revealed to the public in any way. As I've said, this is a fundamental credibility problem. And in part, by the way, the city could do nothing about that pre-Stefan Clark, because only in July of 2018 did the state law change that allowed cities to actually reveal in different ways the personnel records of any of its public safety officers. Now, what I am proposing is that an independent inspector general have not just the authority, but the duty to conduct an independent investigation for any incident under those three categories. And that those findings be released to the police commission, the public, and the city council. The findings, conclusions, and recommendations for discipline. And that all that be out in the public sphere before a city manager could make the ultimate decision on discipline. Imagine an inspector general being out there and saying that here's what happened, here's the severity of it, here are our conclusions, and here is our recommendation. Imagine the police commission being able to weigh in on the same. Imagine how that then changes the entire dynamic of how an ultimate decision is viewed by the public. I think that's a big deal. I think it's a significant change. And I think it is important. And the city council passed it unanimously. Is that enough? No. But it ought to gain more than just a raspberry by people. Good raspberry, by the way. To see it for what it is, and that is an important part of the change.
Mm-hmm. And I'm not sure about all the dynamics and how it resulted in the raspberry, but do let me pass on one criticism that I hear from people, that by the time people arrive at council chambers, you've already got your solution and you've already got the votes, that maybe you're too good of a politician and there's not the committee hearing process in which they feel like they could impact the result of what's going to happen.
So
what would you say to that?
And I hear that and I can accept that, but think about the inconsistent message that is sometimes put forward by some activists. One, you're not moving fast enough. Get it done. Where is the change? Two, you're moving too fast because you're not allowing more input. By the way, the council meetings, even in COVID, right? Our council meetings are 4.5, 5 hours long. And I will listen to the public in any form, in any way, in any fashion. I have been listening. I've been listening to my fiercest critics. I have looked at all of it, not in a defensive way or, God, you don't know me or look at all I've done. Just the opposite. I'm taking it in. I wrote an op-ed piece in the Sacramento Bee, your former employer, a week ago Sunday, that I don't think many politicians would write. I acknowledged my own flaws. I acknowledged my own systemic reaction to sort of accepting the status quo in some instances, even though I have been a politician that has constantly gone out to the edge in my career. But I've acknowledged that I've got to dig deeper here and to seize the moment. And so but sometimes, you know, I'm also going to fight back a little bit because sometimes the expectations are, no expectation is unreasonable, but I think it's important to point out where people say you're not moving nearly fast enough. And at the same time saying you move too fast because you put forward a fundamental reform that people have been asking for a long time, but you did it without listening to us. I'm listening for years. And now I'm listening for months and weeks and actually trying to respond with things that are meaningful.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, that's the fundamental issue right now. You can't win for losing when you're playing mayor in disaster mode. You've gone from one situation to the next.
I'm doing my best.
You might be a little too old for this. Did you ever play SimCity?
Did I ever what?
Play the game SimCity. Have you ever heard of that?
No. What is it?
No, it's a city building game, and you lay out the roads and the water supply and the pipes, and the AI generates where the houses are built. And if you've got disaster mode turn on, every once in a while a tornado will come and cause a big problem, and you've got to decide whether or not you're playing with disaster mode on or disaster mode off. You, Mr. Mayor, definitely have disaster mode on. I guess final thoughts as we sort of wrap up here. You've committed to 30 minutes. I appreciate that. As you sort with the COVID disaster plus this moment of social justice reform, talk about how you figure out what's next and what's the process for meeting the moment, but also figuring out where you need to be as you say, the mayor of the whole city.
The last months have only deepened my commitment to what motivated me to run for mayor in the first place. I recognize I'm accountable. I'm fully accountable. It has only intensified my resolve to help lead a city that invests in neighborhoods, invests in young people, invests in inclusion in real ways. And that we make the systemic changes around public safety and police reform specifically that are going to be meaningful and long lasting. It has not discouraged me. It's been a lot of stress. There's no question about it. It's been a unique time, but it has only made me want to deliver for the people of Sacramento, including the people that are most unhappy with me and most unhappy with the institutions, even more. I'm going to do my best.
All right. Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really appreciate your time and your efforts on this, and understand your background in fighting for social justice reform, and I hope you find the solutions to help navigate Sacramento through this current time, and urge you that perhaps and sometimes the middle isn't the right place to be, but you will find the right spot among progressive thought to find solutions that result in better outcomes for people.
My critics on the other side would say, rightfully so, that I am not in the middle. I am not in the middle.
All right.
See ya.
Not a progressive Darrell Steinberg. We'll continue this conversation at some future time. Thanks a lot, sir.
Continue. Look forward to it. Thanks so much, Ed.
All right. Thanks. All right. Thank you again to Mayor Darrell Steinberg for that conversation about social justice reform. To sort of maybe wrap up some of what we heard. I think the mayor can argue, and I would agree that on paper he's led a lot of the significant social justice reforms and movement within the California legislature, and he has an opportunity now to make significant change for Sacramento residents. It is not smooth waters as you try to figure out the answers in this chaotic situation, but I hope that he can get real solutions and figure out ways to listen and to triangulate the right answers, because the answers are may not be in what you hear in the streets, and they're certainly not where the status quo. But ever forward. We'll search for solutions. Thanks for checking this out. I'm on Patreon if you want to support this broadcast and independent journalism. I'm also on social media if you want to follow me there. I'm on Twitter at NewsFletch, Instagram at PerpetualF, and YouTube at Ed Fletcher. Appreciate everybody who's watched this broadcast, and looking forward to future conversations. That's all for now. Thanks a lot, Ed Fletcher, ever forward.